Silence settled across the Senate Banking Committee hearing hall when Senator Marco Rubio moved closer to his microphone, irritation briefly crossing his face. The Florida Republican delivered his remarks straight toward Representative Jasmine Crockett, an invited policy expert on disaster insurance reform. Rubio started sharply, his voice reflecting mounting frustration. "You speak for Dallas, yet stand here advising Florida and other coastal states on insurance direction," he declared with pointed criticism. "But you have never fully lived the realities behind the problems we carry here." Media cameras zoomed in as Rubio, a veteran lawmaker who once ran for national office, pushed the tone higher. He targeted Crockett's reform stance, accusing her of supporting expansive federal authority. "You favor regulatory mandates that put pressure on markets already fighting for stability," Rubio said. "You argue for federal oversight while dismissing the experience of those who have navigated these challenges for decades." Committee members exchanged uneasy looks. Chairman Brown tried to restore order, but Rubio raised his hand signaling him to stand down. Rubio pressed further, reframing the debate for the public audience. "People must realize," he said firmly, "that Democrats, including Representative Crockett, are pushing to impose federal insurance standards that ignore state-level complexities." He cautioned, "These proposals may sound promising, but they risk damaging homeowners in Florida and every state standing in the path of rising climate threats." Crockett remained centered, quietly organizing her files. Rubio believed he had set the stage. But he had no idea how prepared Crockett was. The Texas congresswoman had arrived armed not with reactive energy, but with documented facts, capturing Florida's market failures and aligning them directly with Rubio's own disaster policy votes. Crockett did not match emotion with emotion. She met narrative with evidence. Before returning to the hearing moment that shifted the argument, do not forget to follow along for more breakdowns of political exchanges shaping U.S. crisis policy, disaster funding, and insurance reform. Now, back to the instant Rubio assumed control, still unaware that clearer context was seconds away from rewriting the story. Rubio was no unknown figure. A 53-year-old lifelong resident of Florida politics, he had consistently cited his hurricane recovery experience to defend minimal federal involvement in state insurance decisions. Tailored suit in place and posture firm, Rubio insisted that Florida required deeply customized legislation, not federal frameworks influenced by lawmakers from inland Texas, where hurricane risk is historically far lower. Originally intended to address a national property insurance crisis, the hearing had evolved into a broader critique of Democratic reform positions. Many expected Rubio's polished rhetoric to close the discussion with authority. He had delivered similar arguments with dominating confidence in previous public hearings. But Crockett had trained for this exact moment. And when the microphone returned to her hands, she shifted the entire axis of the conversation. Crockett, a 42-year-old Democratic rising figure from Dallas by representation, entered Congress after a career spent challenging major insurance corporations in legal disputes. Unlike Rubio, her understanding of insurance policy did not come solely from disaster recovery commentary, it came from courtroom experience, client impact analysis, market filings, and systematic legal argumentation. As a former civil rights lawyer and Texas House legislator, Crockett had already earned national attention for intense data-backed questioning and structured reasoning during hearings. She was not shaken by Rubio's tone. She had planned for it. While Rubio mocked her distance from Florida's catastrophes, Crockett's staff had spent weeks compiling state-to-state insurance failures with Florida positioned at the epicenter of the breakdown analysis. The contrast at the hearing was unmistakable. Rubio delivered narrative. Crockett responded leveraging public filings. Rubio objected accusing ambush tactics. But the sources spoke for themselves. Every statistic Crockett cited came from transparent public regulatory disclosures tied directly to Florida's insurance infrastructure, market exits, and disaster relief records. Then came the disruption point. Florida's insurance premium trajectory had surged at nearly 3 times the pace of hurricane-exposed Gulf neighbors, despite Florida experiencing 16 hurricane-free years before 2017. Over 1.2 million homeowners had been dropped from private insurers, being shifted into the state-supported Citizens Insurance Program, a dependency Rubio had once publicly cautioned against. Then Crockett introduced Rubio's documented votes, showing repeated opposition to federal disaster insurance assistance expansion, FEMA pre-disaster mitigation funding, and the reauthorization of the National Flood Insurance Program, each policy choice impacting his own state's insurance support infrastructure. And then the final shift. Cameras caught the senator leaning forward, scribbling faster. Crockett had delivered the blow quietly, exactly where accountability sits. Not in speeches. In voting record. In finance disclosures. In market consequences. And most revealing, Rubio had received over $2.3 million in campaign support from the insurance sector through transparent disclosure records, positioning him among the most industry-funded meeting members within the hearing chamber. Crockett's conclusion was clear. Market failure does not respond to narrative, Crockett declared. Federal frameworks cannot be rejected when state-only strategies have failed to prevent insurer exits, soaring rates, or coverage collapse. She emphasized that unstable insurance markets are not protected through rhetoric, they are shielded through proven coordinated action between state regulation, federal disaster funding, litigation reform, mitigation incentives, and transparent disaster risk disclosures. The hearing no longer felt routine. Within hours, segments of the exchange flooded every major digital platform. Political commentators, policy analysts, and financial experts dissected the implications. Even conservative frameworks that once backed state-only regulation eventually acknowledged that Florida homeowners were facing a financial emergency, market instability, and coverage collapse that speeches alone could not resolve. Rubio challenged academic framing. Crockett countered using state filings. Rubio leaned on reputation. Crockett responded with documentation. Rubio debated ideology. Crockett answered with precedent from coastal states like Louisiana, Alabama, and South Carolina, each facing hurricane exposure, each adopting targeted hybrid reforms that stabilized litigation and market risk while preserving consumer protection. For Crockett, it was no longer just testimony. It became a national inflection point. For Rubio, it was no longer just a defense. It became a question of consequence. The hearing was no longer about persuasion. It was about credibility measured through evidence. And the lesson left behind, louder than microphones and arguments, was simple. In policy debates tied to real-life crises, substance still outweighs style. Because when disasters strike and markets fail, families do not remember speeches. They remember results tied to action. Stay connected for more analyses of defining political moments reshaping crisis policy, disaster accountability, market reform, and the national narrative around insurance solutions structured through verifiable evidence, not rhetoric alone.